Welcome to Our Stories Matter, Campus Voices, civil engagement in an era of division. This season, we're asking one urgent question. How do we engage across deep differences on college campuses without shutting each other down?
I'm Susie Hess, here with my co-host, Miri Bar-Halpern.
At a time when conversations can turn tense, polarized, or silent altogether, we're slowing things down. We're practicing something harder than arguing, listening. In this season, we interview leading scholars, journalists, filmmakers, and legal experts who share practical tools for navigating difficult dialogue, including confronting the rise of Jew hatred on campus.
This isn't about avoiding difficult conversations. It's about developing the relational courage to stay engaged in them. It means showing up with curiosity, respect, and a willingness to listen, even when it's uncomfortable. Join us as we explore what it takes to remain in the conversation during a time of deep division.
Welcome back to Our Stories Matter. So how do we break the cycles of trauma and hatred in the face of just unimaginable grief? Today, we sit down with Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, who is the founder of Realign For Palestine and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council.
This episode is deeply human. We talk about grief, courage, and holding on to your humanity, which isn't always easy. Ahmed, who was raised in Gaza, shares his personal journey of grieving family members who died by Israeli airstrikes, while he's continuing to reject hate and speak out against extremism, including Hamas. This is an episode you definitely don't want to miss, so let's get started. Okay, so welcome, Ahmed. I'm super excited to see you this morning and always. I mean, we just met in Miami, but I'm excited to see you this way too.
Thank you. Delighted to speak to both of you. Really, really excited.
Well, once we heard your voice, I mean, we've heard your voice before, but in Miami, then of course we have so many questions. Just to start off with, to give context. So you grew up in Gaza. In the current war, you have been super outspoken of Hamas. And I'm wondering what personal experiences shaped the way that you see the conflict today, because you pretty much are a unicorn.
Well, so I want to start by saying there are things that are unicornish about me, but I actually don't believe that I am a unicorn in the sense that my belief is that there are thousands of Ahmeds out there. They just happen to struggle to find their voice. They happen to have a hard time being as outspoken as I am, not because they don't exist, but because of the barrier to entry, both in the Gaza Strip, in my native homeland, but also here in the United States. And so just briefly, what shaped my views, my perceptions, my demeanor, my value system is precisely the fact that I lived in Gaza when Hamas was on the rise politically during the second Intifada. And that was especially starting in the year 2000 when the second Intifada began. That really was, I would argue, the most critical time for the terror group to go from a fringe element of the Palestinian political landscape to a mainstream political, militant, and societal player and social player. And so I remember how they infiltrated mosques and schools. I remember how they played with language and the incitement and the way that they really changed even the value system in the society to make themselves synonymous with the concept of resistance. I remember ways in which they eroded any prospect of a political negotiated settlement. They chipped away at the fragile but viable Oslo peace process. They sought to commandeer relevance and authority through the use of religion, as well as later on the abuse of the national narrative. And so fast forward, when October 7th happened, I felt really, I had been tracking what's been going on with Hamas, particularly because my family all remained in Gaza when I left in 2005. So I very much felt compelled and a sense of urgency to really put myself out there to both humanize the Palestinian people and to say they're not all Hamas, they're not all participants in October 7th, and to push back on some of the extreme narratives about the Palestinian people, but also to clarify to folks that Hamas is not a legitimate entity. Hamas is not a resistance movement. Hamas is worthy of derision. It's a terrorist group. The Palestinians have suffered from it. And so that is how I reached this, through a combination of lived experience, continuous contact through family and friends, research, observation, and October 7th being kind of the climactic act, if you will, of their horrendous rise to prominence.
You know, Ahmed, what I appreciate about your voice, and even before we met you at the Academic Engagement Network conference, was that you're able to hold different perspectives and different views. As you're calling Hamas out, you're also loud enough about the things that the Israeli government is doing wrong. And I think it's so rare and powerful, because I think that's what makes us human being, being able to sit in the gray and an uncomfortable part of it. And you mentioned a little bit before that Palestinians do have spectrums of thought. They do think in different ways. And unfortunately, what I can say as an Israeli, what we hear are the loud voices, the more extreme one. From your experience growing up there, what do you think prevent people from speaking up or from showing the range of views, either in Gaza or what we're seeing outside of Gaza?
Precisely. And I appreciate your recognition of that, because there's unfortunately been this portrayal, this inaccurate portrayal of anybody who speaks against Hamas must therefore be a traitor, a sellout, a Zionist, a Mossad agent, or somebody who's lesser than an authentic Palestinian. To which I simply say, like, look at Arabic social media in Gaza and see how full it is of critiques of Hamas, and see how, ironically, you'll find a lot of Palestinians, even if it's in private, critique of Hamas and derision of Hamas and disgust with Hamas is such a mainstream view among large segments of Palestinian society, and particularly in Gaza, where they've had to deal with the consequences of Hamas's rule, of Hamas's violence, of Hamas's terror, of Hamas's theft of their resources.
I'm wondering, what does trauma do to people in terms of how they think politically? Does it impact the black and white thinking? I mean, obviously, you just said that, you have PTSD, you've experienced that too. So how are you not in that black and white thinking? And is trauma a part of it?
Well, so I'll share some thoughts with you, granted, as someone who is not a licensed therapist or someone who is not a clinical psychologist, but kind of from my point of view, very much so trauma plays a major role. And in my experience, there's a difference between firsthand trauma and secondary trauma. So let's start with the second one. I think a lot of folks, for example, in the what you would call quote unquote pro-Palestine community, many of them, particularly Arab, Muslim, Palestinian Americans, have secondhand trauma of seeing the scenery of death and destruction and the horror that has unfolded in the Gaza Strip. Just as many diaspora Jews in the pro-Israel community and Israelis abroad and self-identified Zionists have secondhand trauma, having seen the October 7th attack and the plight of the hostages, and now 2.5 years of war with Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas. So both communities, regardless of asymmetry, just principally have trauma. And that trauma can cause some people to shut down and become very angry and rageful and hateful and go for maximalism. Or, as I have observed, in some instances, it absolutely causes people to want to break out of the isolation of trauma or the cyclical nature of trauma. Because some of it, and as I've experienced it, as my family have experienced it, there is generational trauma, but then, and the Jewish community have experienced that over the generations and the millennia of displacement and anti-Semitism and pogroms and and the Holocaust. And so the idea being that there's a feedback loop of trauma that keeps people entrapped. And then there is just trauma that is secondhand that keeps people in such a dark place. And that's the secondhand trauma. So, like, for example, my brother who's in Gaza right now, I think his level of trauma is more intense, and he's very anti-Hamas, but he has experienced the loss of some of his colleagues. He's had to dig our family members when they were hit by Israeli airstrikes. And he struggles with his willingness to be to engage in the kind of healing and reconciliations with Israelis. He's not exactly where I am, because he's still in that trauma, and he runs the field work for one of the largest medical NGOs in Gaza. So he's daily seeing a lot of just the horror and the consequences. Wow. But despite that, he's not pro-violence, he's not pro-terror, and he's very anti-Hamas, and he's able to hold multiple truths, but he thinks that Israel committed horrendous crimes in Gaza, and he thinks that Israel is like, some of that was completely unnecessary, and he's not there yet. Versus, for example, his children and his wife, whom I took out of Gaza. And by the way, he and his wife and children were in our family house that I grew up in when it was hit by an Israeli airstrike, and we lost some family members. And I lost my 12-year-old niece, Farah. But he was in the house with the children. They dug their way out of the rubble, and I got them out of Gaza, and I put them in the UAE. The children, when I picked them up, I went to Egypt and I got them out, and they were skinny and they were screaming all the time. And now, almost 2 years in the UAE, the children they're thriving. They're doing really well, and they're in school, and his wife is doing well, and and my mom is there. My mom is also out of Gaza, and because there was an endpoint. Relatively speaking, there was an endpoint to first degree trauma. There's a little bit, and the UAE is also an environment that's conducive to healing and recovery, and it doesn't embrace the violent narratives. I worry, if I had brought them to the United States and some of the environments here, I wonder if they've been exposed to some of the pro-Palestine narratives here. I wonder, versus the UAE, where it was actually a lot more peaceful there than it was here. But so similarly for me, I both had an endpoint, but at the same time, there was secondhand trauma from the continuity of it. And so I made a choice to break away from the vicious cycle of hatred, incitement, violence, revenge, rinse and repeat. And that was a choice enabled by doing personal work, doing some of the healing and recovery work. Some of that is through therapy. Some of that is through pharmaceuticals. Some of that was through nature. Some of that was through connecting with others. A lot of that was through meeting Israelis and Jews. And during the war, part of my healing actually was about connecting with victims of October 7th, survivors of October 7th, hostage families. There was ironically and strangely, something very healing and I would argue, as strange as this sounds, something very beautiful about the two of us connecting, because despite, again, the asymmetry, and this isn't a compare and contrast of the suffering and who's suffering more or less. That's almost besides the point. But there was something really meaningful and deep about people across the aisles, the sides, connecting across their traumas and being each other's allies. What does it take to that what I mentioned earlier about breaking the barrier of entry? What does that look like? Is it just a gradual step? Is it a conversation with Israelis? Is it baby steps like publicly normalizing in the open with your face and name attached to it, critique of Hamas? Well, I know that two of my friends recently were just tortured and beaten almost to death for doing just that in Gaza. So like it remains a very dangerous thing to do. So what does it then look like in terms of doing this even just privately, understanding, for example, the thing about Israelis who drove Palestinians to their medical appointments. And my dad was one of them in Kibbutz Be'eri, the folks that were helping get my dad died 6 years ago and from lung cancer. And it was Israelis who for a year prolonged his life for free at the Hebrew University and transporting his medication and the my sister who's in Jerusalem was at Hadassah, the Hebrew University there. And like this is not a story in Haaretz. This is like my own family members. And so is it just sharing those stories again? Is it through reminding people of what it was like to work inside of Israel? Is it by anonymous Zoom calls or phone calls? Is it by pen pals? How can we begin to humanize each other? And by the way, the same is true for Israelis whom, I've seen the statistics. Like a lot of Israelis don't exactly have positive views of the population of Gaza either. And so like there needs to also be a little bit of like a mutual de-radicalization of both of our people to develop those tendencies. But that's where I eager, and I think to see within our lifetime to see progress made on this work. And I think part of why I was really excited to speak to you too is that rooting some of that healing, some of that de-radicalization work, some of that peace work, reconciliation work in a trauma-centric approach. I actually think like a trauma and a healing-centric approach. I actually think that's the future.
I love that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Every word. You're talking a lot. So before October 7th, I was way deep in the woke world of every DEI committee that existed. And I never thought about including myself or my community because I had light skin. So then October 8th came and I became the October 8th Jew. So now I'm seeing a lot that I never saw before. So I'm wondering if we can switch gears for a minute and talk about the students. So that is what I do every day. And I've been incorporating critical thinking. And what you're talking about, Ahmed, is restorative justice, which is the phrase that has been used in social justice worlds. Okay. That's what you did. I mean, amazing who you are, your conversations, your relationships, even when family members have been killed in the war. So, okay, so holding that piece, you have been critical of certain forms of Western campus activism. So from your perspective, someone who really is from Gaza, what are the students and faculty missing?
Certainly. And I want to just to be clear, the issue isn't with the idea that students have opinions or should be active or not, or that faculty, like it goes without saying that I think universities can be the birthplace of like really unique social movements and corrective actions that enrich humanity and society. That's not what I'm debating against. What I am very critical of is you have a multi-tiered, erroneous approach to what often can, yes, and is a complicated subject. Not complicated in the past. The word complicated was used to dissuade people from engaging on this subject. And that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm saying is to oversimplify things. Like Israel is a white European, 60% of Israelis are of Mizrahi origin. To oversimplify and say all of Israel is apartheid, well, actually in mainland Israel, you have Arab and Muslim and other judges and doctors and this and that, and they can run for office and be in the Knesset and this and that. but in parts of the West Bank, it's like a military occupation and it's separating of the settlements. But that's this. Israel can potentially be vulnerable to something that resembles apartheid, but it's not quite apartheid because the Palestinians don't have citizenship. So let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. But like just throwing this blanket statement, on and on and on. Overly simplistic narratives, reductionist views about river to the sea type language. But that's even, let's go even beyond that. Inability to hold multiple spaces, multiple truths for even Palestinians like myself, whom I can't go and speak on many college campuses, either without security, without having harassment from pro-Palestine students, or without pro-Hamas type students, of what constitutes the right discourse on Israel and Palestine, what constitutes a credible Palestinian, what constitutes legitimate, what constitutes factual. And like when you have faculty members who start teaching students what to think instead of how to think, that's where things have been going terribly wrong. And I've experienced that firsthand. We have seen the promulgation of really despicable, hateful narratives on college campuses. The normalization of Hamas, of terrorism, of jihadi ideology, of far left extremism, of Islamism is no accident in this country and in the Western world. I believe strongly that that has been spearheaded and led really by the academic industrial complex. And that's really a shame because students at elite universities have a significant role, I think, in moderating this discourse and setting the parameters for how do we leverage the unprecedented attention post October 7th to this subject to move forward in a pragmatic and a meaningful way. And instead, they've squandered this opportunity with feel-good sloganeering that has ruined the Palestinian cause, made the Palestinian cause synonymous with masked terrorist-looking people wearing keffiyehs, wearing Hamas flags, wearing the Palestinian flags, when in fact our people are beautiful. Show your face. Speak about our people's history, our people's suffering, grievances, narratives. Don't seek to legitimize what happened on October 7th. Don't embrace violent narratives and acknowledge that for many Palestinians, what they really seek is to live in freedom and dignity. And the two-state solution is something that most Palestinians have already principally agreed to, even if Hamas is flip-flopping here and there. And so why are you now going from your ivory tower, parachute in, and try to say, no, actually, and come up with stupid slogans and chants like, we don't want no two states, we want 48. So that has been, and finally, I'll tell you just in terms of like things for me, instead of looking critically at what happened in Gaza after the withdrawal in 2005 and how fine, Israel and pushed Gazans, 2/3 of them are refugees and this and that, and yes, whatever. Criticize Israel all you want until the point of 2005. That was an opportunity. Regardless of Ariel Sharon's plans, there was an opportunity to make choices, to exercise agency, to show that Gaza is now going to be a role model for what an occupation-free West Bank can look like. Gaza is going to be a role model for Palestinian self-rule, economic success, integration with the Arabs and with the Middle East and with Israel. And it's going to make a compelling case for why Palestinian statehood is going to be so robustly successful. And instead, what academia always covers up and says, Israel pulled out and immediately imposed a blockade. And it's like, wait, excuse me, hold on a second. Israel pulled out. And in less than a year, Hamas competed and won in elections that required it to denounce violence, to leave violence, and accept Israel's existence, like recognize Israel, and it didn't. And it abducted Gilad Shalit, a young Israeli soldier, from the Israeli side of the border in less than a year from Israel's withdrawal. And that was when the blockade was instituted and intensified. And then in less than a year from that, Hamas violently took over the Gaza Strip. My political asylum interview in the United States was June 14th, 2007, which is the very day that Hamas violently took over the Gaza Strip. I was the first Gazan to get asylum in the United States because of Hamas's control of the Strip. And so sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know what the real attitudes of Gazans are towards Jews or Israelis. Sometimes for the pro-Palestine community, it's okay to say, I don't really know what Zionism fully means in every single context. Sometimes for the professor, it's okay to say, I don't have to give all the answers. I can just give the framework and let the students find the answers. Sometimes for someone like me, who reads all the time, who geeks all the time and has no life and just, I spend my life on all of this and I don't, it's okay. I have to tell myself, it's okay. Like, it's okay that I don't know, or I don't have an answer, or I don't, understand. And like things around Iran, things are like, I know a lot about the Middle East and around the region. And I have a lot of things I want to say, but a lot of times I am humble enough to just take a step back. People ask me all the time, and I'm like, yeah, we'll see. We'll just have to see, and, I might not outright say, I don't know, but I'll just be like, we'll have to see. I'm a little bit uncertain, etc. So humility is something that I believe. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. There was the number of times that I have had Israelis and Jews tell me, you're the first Palestinian I've ever spoken to. You're the first Gazan we've ever, I go to shuls and temples all the time. You're the first Gazan we've ever hosted. You're the first Palestinian we've engaged since October 7th. You're the first Palestinian we've ever spoken to. I think it took some humility on their part to recognize that we're taking a little risk, but we think this guy is good, but let's see. And sometimes I'm not a token, okay? I go in there and I tell people what I'm thinking. My goal obviously isn't to push them away, but like, I'm not there just to make people feel good. I'm there to have an honest conversation, to share some things they might not know, things they might like, things they might not like, but share them in the interest of stimulating either conversation, or after they leave, I want them on their own to just be thinking. And so that takes humility on their part. I wish there could be more humility on the part of some of the pro-Palestine community. And by the way, there's being pro-Palestine, which I think universally, many people are totally capable of being pro-Palestine, including many Israelis and Zionists, okay? And then there is pro-Palestine. I call it the quote community. But I wish that the quote community would exercise some degree of humility on college campuses, in the media, online, in person, in the streets, to say, I don't know, or let me listen. Let me not talk. Let me control my emotions. Let me control my rage. Let me control and manage my impulses. Impulse control. My God, like I have to work with it all the time because I get so much hate and death threats and this and that. And and 99% I just delete block. But there are times when I say something and then it's like, nope, that's impulse. And I just move on.
I appreciate that so much. And by the way, I will be bringing this up in class today. We do critical thinking discussions, and there's been students who are loving it because it's making them think. And then there's students who are saying, why can't we just support what we're reading? I wish before October 7th, someone said that to me, because I really blindly went into being part of the woke group. And I didn't question. No one even told me to question. I didn't even think about questioning. So now I'm trying to facilitate what I wish was done with me. So we have two last questions. With everything that you have lived through, that you've experienced, that you're carrying, what still gives you hope?
Well, what gives me hope, I would say number one is the fact that I actually see a lot of people in Gaza. I see an opening in Gaza, in particular in Gaza. that I haven't seen before, which is that as a result of Hamas's behavior and failure over the last 20 years, as a result of the consequences of October 7th, as a result of just the sheer devastation, and the society is broken. The whole society is just, it's kind of like a wet towel and it's constantly being just squeezed, turned and squeezed. I see an opening that people are for something other than Hamas, but not just Hamas as a movement, for something other than the broader resistance, quote unquote, narrative that Gaza should not be a platform for resistance. People don't want their lives destroyed ever again. It's like people actually want to live. They want stability. They want calm. They want hope and opportunity. And people have always wanted that before. But in a sense, there's an ideological shift that I see and witness in Gaza that, like I said, I haven't witnessed before. And it gives me an immense amount of hope. It doesn't mean they're ready for peace with Israel overnight. But what I do believe it can do is it provides an opening for somebody to take them on a slow journey, because it's a journey. It takes time away from the resistance narrative towards the nation building narrative in pursuit of let me say this again, to take them on the slow journey from the resistance narrative toward the nation building narrative in pursuit of the coexistence narrative. And I believe that's attainable and that's achievable. Doesn't happen overnight. And like I said, it doesn't immediately mean they're ready for peace with Israel, but that gives me hope. That gives me optimism. The other piece that gives me hope is that now that the hostages are back, now that there is somewhat of a and yes, the war with Iran is going on, etc. But there's a little bit of distance from Gaza for many Israelis and Jews. I do see a little bit, however little or big, I see some capacity for compassion towards Gaza, which tells me that any human sentiment that's harsh, that's vengeance, anger, resentment, a lot of those strong emotions, they're reversible. They're time bound, they're time specific, and that they're conditions based. And should conditions change, including, inshallah, when we render Hamas largely irrelevant, when we push for an alternative, when we disarm Gaza, when we have something better than what we have right now. I'm seeing people looking at Gaza and saying, we can't have this on our southern border forever. We have to do something for these people. I'm seeing people who are looking at the settler violence in the West Bank and saying this cannot happen, like diaspora Jews and even some in Israel and even some in the military themselves saying we can't just be captured by the far right extremists and some of the even fascist elements of the far right who want a war, a holy war in the West Bank. We have a war with Iran. We have an opportunity to realign with the Arab and Middle East world and countries. And like, we can't squander that because a few people are going on these like insane attacks with no, so that gives me immense hope that humanity's not dead. It is there. It can be restored.
I think, to your point about a journey, just like your journey from trauma to choosing agency and to choosing hope, I think that's what also I'm hearing you saying on both sides for Gaza and for Israelis, to be able to make that choice and leaning with compassion and curiosity. And my hope is that people outside of the Middle East area can do that as well. Okay, so our final question, we ask everybody this. What is one thing you're going to do for your own healing and your own self-care this week?
I will think about what to do for my own. So that's what I'm going to do for my own. I will think about what to do for my own healing and self-care. I have been, last week, my supervisor at work said that he wants me to, it's an official assignment. He wants me, because I've never taken vacation over like 2 years now. And so he wants me to come back to him and tell him what I'm going to do to take vacation somewhere. Now, to be fair, or to be clear rather, I do have, like, I don't know, for me, like sleeping in and playing maybe a video game and watching a show, that counts as vacation. But apparently for most normal people, you have to like physically be away. You have to like maybe be outdoors. You have to meet new faces. And so I will think about what to do for myself. That is what I will do for myself.
I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to text you like, so what did you do for self-care? What is it?
Khalas. I do have a friend of mine. I have an invitation to go from a friend invited me to go to Hawaii. And I might go with them to join them there and their family and loved ones eventually. I've never been to Hawaii. But it's hard to think about this when there's just so much going on right now. But I will think about it this week, and you can text me, and
Okay.
I will report back.
And by the way, I will be in Hawaii in 10 days, so you should go soon, and then we can hang out.
Done deal. I did, if it can have, I have a 15,000 word essay piece due in a week, so I have to finish that, and then once that's done, the sky's the limit.
All right, we're going to be like following up with you.
Inshallah.
Ahmed, thank you so much for your voice and for your courage and for your humbleness and everything in between. I feel very fortunate that we've met you, and inshallah, let's bring the peace.
Inshallah. Thank you, my dearest. Bless you. And really, really eager to cross paths in person soon. And bless you and your community. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank the Academic Engagement Network for their generous support, music designer Ivan Reyes, podcast coordinator Chandler O'Reilly, and to all of our listeners. Today's episode is co-produced by Associate Professor Susie Hess and Dr. Mary Bar-Halpern.
Our Stories Matter, Campus Voices, Civil Engagement in an Era of Division, is brought to you by Trauma Informed Learning Alliance. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and our website at traumainformedla.org.
Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more people can have access, and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep healing through our storytelling episodes.